Okay, I'm hoping this is it. All right, everyone, and let's get started, inshallah. All right, beautiful. So this is the final session, inshallah, for the religious pluralism course. And well done to all of you for making it this far, and to everyone else who continues to watch the videos. Well done to everyone, and thank you all for being on this journey with me. It was really my immense pleasure to be with every single one of you. So this is the last class, and I'm hoping that people will see that we are now coming back full circle to the first session, because really the first session was all about this really beautiful and important word that's called tajaliyat, right? Which we can translate into English as the divine self-disclosures or divine self-revelations, when God shows himself to you, right? That's called a tajalli, right? So this is really the last session. Now, we talked about the inclusion of the divinely revealed Sharia, right? The inclusion of the other divinely revealed laws, all of them. Then after that, you've got the inclusion of all the man-made laws, the Nawamis. So you've got the Sharia and the Nawamis. And then those are the laws made by the sages. And now you've got the inclusion of all divinities, which I'm going to show in this presentation, inshallah, right? So Tajalli is connected to Jalla, of course, right? And it's very much in the Quran. It's when Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam asks to see Allah, and he says, "Lan tarani," right? Right? But if this mountain still stands, then you would have seen me, right? The word tajalla is used in that ayah. It's also used in other surahs as well. وَاللَّيْلِ يَغْشَى وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا تَجَلَّى, right? So luminosity is also connected to tajalli. It can be a luminous, or it is actually a luminous self-disclosure. The word self-disclosure means to show yourself. So the root of the word from Jalla, it means it's when the bride takes off her veil on her wedding night and reveals her face, right? It's like when you finally see God's face. That's a tajalli. And there's more than one way to see him, right? So you can translate the word as a manifestation, as a revelation, or as a disclosure, self-disclosure. Now, for the Shaykh al-Akbar, the whole of creation is God's tajalli. That's how he creates things. So every single object in the cosmos is his own tajalli to us, right? But especially with regards to what we call the deities, the gods and the goddesses. And this is how we can conceive of them as well. So think back to the first session we had, right? All those deities I was talking about, you can call them in English epiphanies or theophanies. They pretty much mean the same thing. So these, in our religion, with our framework, we can say that those were tajalliyat of Allah. So Athena is one of his tajalliyat, Aphrodite, Krishna is his tajalli, Demeter is his tajalli, Persephone, any deity you can think of, Atum Ra, Thoth, those are all his tajalliyat, right? And then also remember when we talked about the visceral, heartfelt emotions that come from connecting to a divine presence, right? It's something that's very raw and something that goes very deep. That comes from a tajalli. Like when Anne Frank is looking at a statuette of Venus, or Damascus is looking at a statue of Aphrodite, or Ramanujan is connecting to his patron goddess, right, Lakshmi. And then you've also got, of course, the wonderful Indian mystic, but I forgot what his name was, but his patron goddess was Kali. But his name escapes my mind right now. Ramakrishna, if I'm not mistaken. But if I'm wrong, please correct me. So why talk about gods or tajalliyat, right? Because they have something to tell us about God and his names. And the more you know about God and his names, and the way he shows himself in other beliefs, the greater your portion of the ru'ya will be on the day of judgment, which is called the beatific vision, right? And we've gone through that in the sixth lesson, if I'm not mistaken. So that's from a tajalli to the heart. And that's how one feels a connection with a certain spirit or deity. Now, we can't go through this in full, but it's an incredible diagram that was translated by William Chittick in his book, Imaginal Worlds. And it comes from, I think, chapter 64 of the Futuhat or something like that. And so connected to Tajalliyat are the religions, because each religion is a Tajalli, right? So in this chapter, the Sheikh Al-Akbar shows you how there has to be religious diversity, and it's a circle. There can't not be religious diversity. It is innate to existence. So, therefore, the tajalliyat are connected to the religions, right? Right? And so, for example, he says here, the tajalliyat, the self-disclosures, are diverse, right? They're many and different, only because of the diversity of revealed religions. So it is the fact that there are different religions that we get different tajalliyat. They're intimately connected. That is the cause of it. The cause of the diversity of tajalliyat comes from the religions, because each religion is a tajalli itself. And then he continues and closes the circle the whole way. But we're only going to go through the second box. And now, why are different religions diverse? And so the Sharia, the revealed religions, are diverse only because of the diversity of the divine relationships, what are called the Nasab al-Ilahiyya, which are the divine names. So because you've got divine names and divine attributes, sifat, that is why you get different religions, because each religion is an expression of a particular divine relationship and the way God wants to relate to specific people in humanity, because you have many different kinds of people in the world throughout time with different requirements. So each religion and each sharia meets a specific need for that time period. That is caused by the diversity of the divine relationships. Because God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will have a specific relationship to each people in a way that is unique to them and is not repeated by anyone else. And then he goes on and on, right? Anyone who wants to see the Arabic, there's the beautiful Arabic as well, but it's in a slightly different way. So if you can see on the side to the right, he'll say, right, إنما اختلفت التجليات لاختلاف الشرائع, right? And then he'll say after that. So he's going from like left to right. إنما اختلفت الشرائع لاختلاف النسب الإلهية, and so on and so forth, right? But if anyone has the ambition to do so, this is a fantastic section of the Futuhat to read. You can find it in Imaginal Worlds. So that's why we have a diversity of religions. They're connected to the Jaliyat, right? Each religion is a necessary expression of a particular tajalli. Why? Because لا تكرار في tajalli. لا تكرار في tajalli. God's tajalli does not repeat itself. This is one of the fundamental axioms of spirituality, if you like, and especially Ibn Arabi's mystical metaphysics. There's no repetition in the divine disclosure, which means that each religion must necessarily be unique and never repeat. It can't not be unique. It has to be. We also came across this in the fourth session, I think, right? That's why you have different places of worship, right? Due to the diversity of tajalliyat. God's tajalli to Judaism is different to his tajalli to Christianity, which is different to his tajalli to Muslims, and so on with all the other religions. Just as there must be different tajalliyat, right? Then there must be different places of worship. And so I want to come to the final section of this whole program, which is the inclusion of the divinities. If Ibn Arabi talks about the inclusion of the divinely revealed laws, then after that, the inclusion of the man-made laws, which aren't divine, then how are the divinities included? So let's get into it. This comes from Fasnuh, which we've touched upon in our Fusus Hikam classes, but we're just going to go through it very briefly here. And you'll get into it in more detail as we go on through the first class, inshallah. So we know that first Nuh, it talks about the different polarities of tanzih and tashbih, right? God's transcendence and God's immanence. How God is connected to the world and how God is far apart from the world and has nothing to do with it, right? He's both. He has both attributes, right? And God is known in both ways. Now, the story, which is a tragic story of Sayyid Nuh alayhi salam and his people, the tragic story here is that due to the particular attributes of Sayyid Nuh alayhi salam and what he could bring, the idols, who are the gods of Noah's people, could not be acknowledged or accepted, right? But what Noah's people, Qawm Noah, realize is that the idols are God's duhura. The idols are manifestations of God and his attributes. Because he says in the fuss, for the real God has in each created thing له في كل خلق a manifestation, a duhura. He has in each khalq a duhura, from which he appears from it and shows you his face, but especially in the idols, right? And then he also says further in the fuss, and we'll get into it in our fusus classes, the real has a face in each thing worshipped, right? And why is that important? Because whoever knows that face knows God in it. But whoever is ignorant of it is ignorant of God to that extent. Whoever sees God's face in that thing knows more of God. And whoever does not see his face in it knows less of God. And that is so poignant, right? That's so bittersweet to talk about, because you can see that when a person, a worshiper, has a particular relationship to a specific deity, he is tasting something unique to him. And then if you bring a revelation that says you must exclude that deity, you're asking him to exclude his particular unique and deep, heartfelt relationship to that deity. How is that going to go? That's not an easy thing to do. Someone who brings that kind of revelation, that's called a revelation of Furqan, right? And so the gods that they worshipped, Qawm Nuh, were Wad, Suwa'a, Yaghuth, Ya'uq, and Nasr, right? And so what they say is that in the tafsirs, right? They say that Wad, they built the god Wad upon the form of a man. So Wad was a statue of a man. Suwa'a was a woman. Yaghuth was a lion. Ya'uq was a horse. And Nasr was like either a vulture or an eagle. They're not really too sure about that. So that's Furqan if you exclude the deities. But if you recognize the haqq that is in those deities, you are including them. That is called Quran. Because Quran means jama, to bring together and include together, right? And so that's the modality that the Sharia of Muhammad brings, which is Quran. And therefore he brings the holy revealed book that's called the Quran, which contains Furqan as well. So the Sharia of Muhammad does not exclude Furqan. But the previous prophets, what they brought was Furqan, not Quran, right? And so I skip a huge portion of the fuss just so we can get to the point. And so it's shown in this ayah, right? And it's towards the end of the surah, because the whole fuss is about commenting upon this surah of Sayyidina Nuh and his story, right? Which you read, which you're told the story on two levels: the literal level and the level of ma'rifah. How the people of Nuh they're arifin in some way, and Sayyidina Nuh he has superior ma'rifah, and they're talking to each other with regard to their arfan, and it's amazing when you get into the details. But then when you reach the climax of the story, this is what you get. And so we get to this ayah, which says, Bismillah, مِمَّا خَطِيئَاتِهِمْ أُغْرِقُوا فَأُدْخِلُوا نَارًا فَلَمْ يَجِدُوا لَهُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنصَارًا, right? So if you translate literally, it says, because of their mistakes, but some of the Fusus commentators actually read that as because of their footsteps. the steps that they took on their journey led them to this point. Because of their sins and mistakes, they were drowned, and then they were made to enter into a fire. And so they now this is a really interesting part. There was no one to help them. Just the gist of the rest of the ayahs, there was no one there to help them except, right? No one could help them but God. And there was no one there to help them, right? That's the ordinary tafsir. But if you'll forgive me for saying this, if you read the verse literally, it also says something else. I want to put it to you, people. If you read the verse literally, what other meaning could you find? And it's to do with the second half of the ayah, right? It says, فَلَمْ يَجِدُوا لَهُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنصَارًا. If you translate that literally, word for word, it says, they did not find anyone helping them, or let's even better than that, they did not find for them anyone apart from God as helpers. They did not find anyone for them as helpers apart from God, right?
Is it implying that God was there, like Nasir?
It was implying that, so they did not find anyone helping them except God. So exactly as Nira. So God saved them. If you read that literally, they did not find anyone apart from God saving them. So, in other words, so he says, so Ibn Arabi, Sheikh al-Akbar, says, فَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَيْنَ أَنصَارِهِمْ. God was their very helpers. فَهَلُكُوا فِيهِ إِلَى الْأَبَدِ. So they perished in him forever and ever. And actually, the story goes on, actually. And so Tilim Sani, he explains it in commentaries because Tilim Sani is very candid. So he says, meaning they found God saving them, none other than him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is as though Ibn Arabi said quite simply, God saved them. Yes, Ataf.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess for the first verse of Quran, yeah, if it's literally the meaning, it would mean that only God saved them. But in my opinion, it is more that God could mean saved them, but in reality, they never been saved simply because they were into the nar. Because in the first statement or first sentence, it says that because of their mistakes, they were admitted to nar, or that's it. So
you are absolutely right, but you know what?
denied or a kind of thing. يعني الجملة الأولى نفت الثانية، الحماية أو النصرة. يعني كان ربنا بإمكانه ينصرهم، ولكن لكونهم أخطأوا فأغرقوا وأدخل النار، اللي هي الجملة الأولى.
Okay, I have a question for you.
Yes.
What's the word? What does the word nar mean?
I mean, literally, it means fire, which is exactly the hell or Jahannam.
Okay,
I mean,
so
imagine
okay, good. Yeah, good.
nar.
So, okay, so you're saying nar here means Jahannam, right? And that's the tafsir. That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a second tafsir, by the way. It's not even like Sufi mystics. No, there's a second tafsir, by the way. So Ibn Arabi is going with the second tafsir. You're right. For the first tafsir, nar means Jahannam. The second tafsir means it's nar in the water, right?
In the water.
Yeah, yes. So God caused a fire to appear in the water. So they drowned in the water and burned in the fire in the water, right?
Okay.
And that has a very special meaning, which I don't want to talk about right now. I'll save it for the Fusus al-Hikm classes. But that has a very special meaning, right? So, but by the way, you're still justified, Artaf, in asking what kind of a salvation is that? That's a weird kind of saving, right? So the question is how? How are they being saved, right?
Yeah.
So Mu'ayyid al-Din Jandi, one of the primary commentators of the Fusus al-Hikam, this is what he says. He says, when the gaze towards the real is cut off, when you can't see al-haq, then there remains no helper to save the abid in what he worships. So when you can't see God, that is when you're not saved. So now the Fusus al-Hikm commentators, they're going to talk about something interesting, but it's so strange you can't really say it directly, but what they mean is very clear. So he says, so when the real transforms himself in the forms of the servant's beliefs, right? إذا تحول الحق في صور اعتقاد المعتقدين العابدين. So he transforms himself in the form of their beliefs, right? And of course, if I say تحول, you know immediately, this is very similar to the hadith of تحول. يوم القيامة, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he transforms himself into different Sur, right? We talked about this in session 6. In what they worship and believe in. It is at that moment that God will save them by disclosing himself to them and their gaze. So he will save them by doing tajalli to them. But the meaning is still not very clear, right? So we come now to the commentary of, I should have put this, Abdurrahman Jami. Afwan, I should have put his name. We come to the commentary of Abdurrahman Jami, who explains it. What you see in bold is the Fusus text, and then he comments on it after that. So he's commenting on it line by line. So they did not find. So now Jami says, that is, when Noah's people entered a fire in the water's essence, right? This is the second tafsir. They did not find for them, that is for themselves, any helpers apart from God. Rather, they found God subhanahu wa ta'ala disclosing himself. He's doing tajalli, disclosing himself to them in the forms of their helpers. Bisuwar ansarihim. For God was their very helpers, even if they were imagining prior to this that he was other than them. Right? He's leading you to think about the meaning of the word ansarahum. Why is it in the jam'a and not mufrad? Because God could have said, they found no one except him being a nasir or nasir. He didn't say nasir or nasir. He said ansarahum. Why?
Is that referring to the gods that they were, the idols that they were worshipping?
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a
that's
kabir.
yeah, exactly. So this is literally it. So the idol, so what they found was Wad, Suwa, Yaghut, Ya'uq, and Nasr saving Noah's people, right? That's what they found. The idols were like what Noah's people imagined, which is tashbih, but they were also completely unlike them by virtue of God's ahadiyya flowing through them, which is tanzih. So God transforms himself within the forms of the beliefs of Noah's people, salam, disclosing himself as their gods. But it was it was not this God or that God who came to rescue. What they witnessed was God, Allah, disclosing himself as Wad, unveiling himself as Suwa', revealing himself as Yaghuth, Ya'uq, and Nasr. All so many forms manifesting themselves within the one entity until they realized there is no God but God. It is the one God with 1,000 or infinite masks. It is in this manner that Ibn Arabi has most wondrously, well, I'm not going to say it, I'll say it in a second. But this is an example of the inclusion of the divinities because they are God's madahir. The idols and the aliha are God's madahir. But all these aliha, they're one God. Yes, Ghada.
So what do you mean by the fire and the water? Was it like by them droning, they came to this realization of al-ahadiyya?
Well, there's two tafsirs, right? So the fire is in the water, okay? Like there's a physical fire in the water. Yes, when they drowned and they entered into this fire, Sheikh Akbar, he says that this water is knowledge of God. It's hira. It's pure hira. It's pure knowledge of God. And the fire is this subuhat. It is his subahat, the glories of his face, and revelation that pummel the spiritual seeker. So yes, while they're drowning and burning in the water, they're gaining an unfathomable amount of spiritual knowledge, because do you remember when I said that Qawm Nuh, they're in maqam Quran? And what's Quran? Jama'? Correct?
Yeah.
Quran is Jama',
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And Quran is Jama'. And what did Sayyidina Abu Sa'id al-Kharaz say? I found God. How did I find God? I came to know God by the meeting of the opposites. By the meeting of the opposites. Is fire the opposite of water? Is not fire the opposite of water?
Yeah,
So
it
when the
is the
fire,
opposite.
so when the fire meets the water, right? They find God. This is the mighty Quran being made manifest in the cosmos. This is Jama', this is Quran. This is the Quran they've been seeking. This is the Jama' and the Quran they've been seeking. And they find it when the fire meets the water. Then they're finding God. Because you find God when the opposites meet. And there's much more to say about that, but we're not going to get into it. We're just only going to take away from this the fact that the idols are God's madahir. But you've got this super interesting part of the fusus where Ibn Arabi interprets the ayah, which normally is read to mean the opposite. He reads it as the opposite, as saying God saved them in that moment. And he did. By revealing himself to them. Because when you see God's face, you do not notice anything else. Everything else disappears for you. You're in what's called fana. You're in fana.
Can I ask something, Dr.
And
Farid?
there's who's that?
Zamira.
Yeah, hi Zanira.
Yeah, I just this ayah that you read and you said, it looks like the opposite, but I feel like it does work because in Surah Kahf, the story of the
Yeah.
two like neighbors were like farming. I just looked it up. It says وَلَمْ تَكُنْ لَهُ فِئَةٌ يَنْصُرُونَهُ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ, which is kind of the same, almost the same, right, as here. But then it says وَمَا كَانَ مُنْتَصِرًا, and then he like says Allah did not help him. But here it doesn't say that, so I feel like it does lend to this reading.
It does, but it's too shocking. It's really shocking and can break some minds, but it works. Yes, here it works, like grammatically, but the meaning is, for some people, it's too much to fathom. Even for some of the Fusus commentators, some of them, they find it so strange. They use logic and syllogistic logic to try to get back to the first meaning, saying no, that's not what Ibn Arabi meant. So thank you, Zanir, by the way. So, I'm trying to draw this back to the first lecture, right? And just remember when we said there's not a single one of these ideas that we talked about in the first lecture, all those different religious, all those different religions and spiritual modes and practices, every single one of them, no matter how diverse they are, I really feel there's not a single one of them that the Akbarian tradition cannot explain or deeply engage with or dialogue with or affirm in some way. It has the ability to bring them all together, all of them, without exception. And I think, inshallah, you'll get that sense by the end of this course. It really has the ability, this Akbarian tradition, to bridge every single belief in the entire world. And so, now, what this leads up to is that the gods are actually one God, right? But they're not denied. So Ibn Arabi, he talks about this ayah from the Quran, and he explains it, right? Can someone read the Arabic for me, please? So the Arabic says in the Quran, Bismillah, وَجَعَلَ الْآلِهَةَ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدًا إِنَّ هَذَا لَشَيْءٌ عُجَابٌ. Right? What does that verse normally mean? If anyone could care to comment on that for me. What does that verse normally mean?
That he's made, the Jala is really interesting though, right? I mean, I feel like literally it's kind of open to interpretation, but
Yes.
he's making plural gods one god. And how strange is that?
Well, that's what I was getting to. Yes, that's not the tafsir, but that's exactly what I was getting up to. Yes, exactly, Sunira. The normal tafsir is that Muhammad negates the other gods, and in some way he does. He negates them, and he only brings one god. And so the Bedouins, the Meccan mushrikun, found that strange. Is that a satisfying explanation? It's not. It doesn't satisfy me, and you want to know why? Because the pagan Meccan mushrikun, they knew about other religions with one god, which were what?
Christianity and Judaism.
Christianity and Judaism. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not weird to them. Maybe they're upset that Muhammad will not worship their idols, which is true. They were upset by that. But it's not weird. It's upsetting. And they're furious by that, amongst other things. But it's not weird. There's nothing strange about that. The strange thing is what Zanira said. He takes all the alihat that they worship, whether it's Alat والعز ومنات الثالثة الأخرى, right? And he says, yes, those are tajaliyat. Those are actual gods, but they're all one God. Don't say that this has been dun Allah. Don't say that. Say that there's only one God, Allah, and that one is Allah. That is His tajalli. That has His presence, His hadra. Now you can say inna hada shay'un ajab. That would make more sense. Of course, that's strange to say what all these aliha, they're actually all one God. That's strange. That's wondrous. That's weird. Something to think about. So Sheikh Akbar talks about that. So in other words, one can perceive a multiplicity of divinity and experience a multiplicity of divinities. That's not forbidden or impossible to experience them and to notice them, right? Each one with its own unique dhawq and tasting, right? Each one with its own unique particular experience that you get from them. But you must say that what you are saying, right, is that they are God and God is one. They're all one. That is Tawheed. Perceiving the many in the cosmos to be one and seeing the multiplicity in the one, right? There's something called al-wahid al-kathir and al-kuthra fil wahid, right? And so he explains further in Fasnuh, the Sheikh Al-Akbar, when he says, فَالْعَالِمُ, he's talking about the real knower of God, al-alim, right? فَالْعَالِمُ, the knower of God, يَعْلَمُ مَنْ عُبِدَ وَفِي أَيَّ صُورَةٍ ظَهَرَ حَتَّى عُبَدَ. The real knower of God, he knows who is being worshipped in reality, which is God, no matter what's the physical manifestation. And in what form this, right, this manifestation appears so that it could be worshipped. And he further knows that وأن التفريق والكثرة كالأعضاء في الصورة المحسوسة كالقوى المعنوية في الصورة الروحانية. So he knows that differentiation and multiplicity, manyness, right? When an idolater, he sees the multiplicity of divinities and the multiplicity that exists in the cosmos, he can't find a common thread to tie them back together. How do you bring them back together? How do you make sense of all this manyness? It's confusing. So he sees everything is broken apart. But the alim, he can see the manyness, but he sees that it's all interconnected, like the limbs of a physical form. I see the fingers, I see the arm, I see the hair, I see the face, I see the stomach, I see the legs, I see the toes, I see this and that and that and that. But it all goes back to one body. Also, like the intellectual faculties in the spiritual form. So what he means by that is like your own spirit has faculties, memory, imagination, intellect, the thinking faculty. They're different faculties, but it goes back to one ruh, because the ruh is the site for all those things, right? So it's as if the aliha are the different limbs, even though God has no limbs. That's not what he's saying, but it is analogous to that. He sees all these tajalliyat working in harmony. He sees how they're all interconnected, go back to one essence, as if they're like these limbs, the body's limbs, but God has no limbs. So I'm not saying that abadan, please don't misunderstand me. فما عبد غير الله في كل معبود. So nothing is worshipped except God and every object that is worshipped. Or if you change the tashkil, this alim himself, the knower of God, فما عبد, he does not worship anything except God in every object of worship. He sees and perceives God in every object of worship. Yes, Ghada. Go
I
ahead.
just want to ask about, like, because it's coming from Fas Nuh. So when he says فَالْعَالِمُ يَعْلَمُ مَنْ عُبِدَ. So
Yep.
when we were talking about Nuh, he was more into التنزيه.
Yes.
So Nuh was like, this العالم الذي يعلم من عبد.
He was, yes, he is, yes. Although Sheikh
still,
Akbar actually here he means someone else, but yes, you could say the same thing about Nuh alayhi salam, exactly. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, which means it goes back again. He knew that they were like worshipping as the idol, but at the same time, he prayed for God to like bring the tufan. But at the
Correct.
same time, this is the confusion for me since last time, and it's coming back again here.
Sure. You're asking why did he pray for the tufan?
Yes.
Excellent question, but I don't want to say it here. Excellent question, but I don't want to say it here. You know how I said there's like two stories going on, the literal story and the story of Ma'rifah? It belongs to the story of Ma'rifah that's happening beneath the surface of the literal story, because he is their sheikh and they are his murids. And part of the tufan is guiding them to their perfection. But I don't want to get into that now. But that's the reason, okay? And we'll get into that much more in the classes on the Fusus. So I found this beautiful passage to do with ancient Egypt, right? Doesn't this sound so similar? Can someone read this out for me, please? Maybe Sahara or anyone?
Sure, I'm outside, so I'm sure that I'm not sure if the music is bothering you on the background.
No, there's no music.
Okay, that's perfect. If it's me was was listening to it then. Okay, I am Ra, continuously praised. I am the knot of the God within the tamarisik. What's that?
Tamarisk. I need to double check. I'm not
Tamarisk.
sure.
I don't know what's that. Okay. My hair is Noon. Noon is the ancient Egyptian water where all the I
Yes,
think the
exactly.
khalq came from. This is according to ancient Egypt. My face is Ra. My eyes are
Yes.
Hathor. My ears are Aput. My nose is she who provides over the lotus leaf. My lips are Anubis. My molars are Sekhmet. My
Incisors, my teeth.
Are Isis, the goddess. My arms are the Ram. Wow. the Lord of Mendes. My breast is me, the Lady of Says. My muscles are the Lord of Khiraha. My chest, I'm not sure about this. My chest is he who is greatly majestic. My belly and my spine are Tehmet. My buttocks are the eye of Horus. My thighs are and my calves are Nut. My feet, my Nut is the sky.
Yes,
This
yes,
one,
exactly.
yeah. My feet are Betah. My toes are living falcons. There are no members of mine devoid of a God, and thus is the protection of all my flesh. I am the Lord of eternity. Wow, this
That,
is so
yeah,
beautiful.
thank you so much, Sahar. And that is beautiful, isn't it? That is amazing. This is very,
Yeah, yes. Wow.
it's,
Thank you for allowing me to read this.
thank you for reading it. This is kind of what we were talking about. And someone else, I think Yasmin, she said this so beautifully. She said that like the mythological expressions that you read here are, it's like poetry. It's like a poetical expression for the theology. And that's exactly what it is, right? All the gods are one God. And so I made this diagram, it doesn't come from anywhere, but you see that all other deities you worship, they're all madahir of Allah and as ahadiyya. Now, you'll see I've highlighted in bold here al-ghayb al-mutlaq. Why do I say that? Because as Muslims worship Allah, but no one worships Allah as he is in himself. You're worshiping him in a certain way. The way you're worshiping him, according to Sheikh Abdul Ghani Nabusi, this Allah that you're worshiping, it's called al-ghayb al-mutlaq, the absolute unseen. That's the one you're worshiping, right? As Muslims. And then you've got all the other deities. They're all madahir of Allah, right? And it all goes back to him. And so he has madahir of these deities in the spiritual world, عالم الأرواح, in the barzakh, عالم المثال, عالم الخيال, in the imagination, and in عالم الأجسام, in the world of bodies, in all what's called the halarat, the divine presences, all of them. And so the Mir Jazairi, the foremost faithful follower of the Shaykh Al-Akbar, he expresses the same idea in this way, in the Muwaqaf, right? So he says, والحاصل, the end result of all that is that إنه إن خطر ببالك واعتقادك أنه تعالى, if it crosses your mind, right? And in your belief that God exalted, right, is كما قال أهل السنة, if he is what أهل السنة والجماعة, the Sunnis, say he is, فهو كذلك وبخلاف ذلك. He is that, but other than that. وإن خطر ببالك واعتقادك, if it crosses your mind and belief, إنه تعالى إنه تعالى كما قالت, if it crosses your mind and belief that God is what كما قالت واعتقدت جميع الفرق, what all the Islamic sects say and believe in, if it crosses your mind that God is what all the Islamic sects and groups say and believe in, right? فهو كذلك وبخلاف ذلك. He is that, but he's also other than that. وإن خطر ببالك أنه تعالى كما قالت واعتقدت جميع الطوائف من إسلام ونصارى ويهود ومجوس ومشركين وغيرهم فهو كذلك وبخلاف ذلك. If it crosses your mind and your belief that God is what all the groups in Islam say, and the Christians, and the Jews, and the Magians, the Zoroastrians, and the polytheists, the associators, and other than them, he is that, but he's also other than that. وإن خاص ببالك واعتقادك أنه, so this is a mistake, أنه كما يقول العارفون المحققون من الأنبياء والأولياء والملائكة فهو كذلك وبخلاف ذلك. And it crosses your mind and belief that God is what the saints, the Gnostics, the verifying Gnostics from amongst the prophets and the saints and the angels. He's what they say he is. God is that, but he's also other than that. فما عبدوه أحد, right? فما عبدوه أحد من خلقه من كل وجه. Nobody worships him in all his faces, in all his aspects. ولا كفر به أحد من كل وجه. Nobody disbelieves in God in all his aspects, in every facet. ولا عرفه أحد من خلقه من كل وجه. Nobody knows God in all his faces, in all his facets. ولا جهله أحد من كل وجه. No one is ignorant of him completely in every single way possible, right? قال الذين هم من عالم الخلق بالله تعالى سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا. Glory be to you, God. We don't know anything about you except what you teach us. That's what the highest ones amongst his creation say about him, right? Then we come to this part about worshiping God in the imagination. We already came across it in the 5th session, but then the Emir Abdullah Jazairi, he adds something else to that, right? So the idea is that there's permission. If you want more details, you go back to the 5th class, right? But the idea is that we are given permission to worship God in the imagination. And this is what he says, because it's in the Hadith Jibreel, when he asks Sayyidina Muhammad, what is ihsan, right? Then Rasul worship God as if you see him. تعبد الله كأنك تراه, as if you see him. So then he says, that's what gives the worshiper permission to worship God through the imagination and to see God through forms in the imagination. So then the Emir Abdullah Jazairi, he says, the muhsin is he who worships God and serves him in what he commands and forbids. Witnessing God, okay? Witnessing him and imagining him according to his belief in God and knowledge of him. For he exalted forbids his servants only from making a physical form out of him, like worshippers of idols and graven images. But as for the imagined forms, al-surah al-mutakhayila, he has permitted them through that hadith. Nay, he desires and orders us to have presence, hudur, with the object of worship, al-ma'bud, in acts of worship by imagining him. But you see what he said, according to one's belief. Isn't that astounding? What are the implications of that? Worshipping God in the imagination according to one's belief, right?
Can I say something, please?
Yeah, sorry,
I
who's that?
remember Mira.
Hi,
I remember
Mira.
once, hello. I remember once Samir Mahmoud, our common friend, he was talking about Ibn Arabi, and he said something very interesting, that how in Islam we have the freedom to imagine God as we want, as in all other religions, there is always like a frame or a way or a certain color or form that God takes. So it's very interesting, like how we have this big freedom of imagination. And I think Ibn Arabi talked about that.
You're completely right, Mira, mashallah. I was actually influenced by Dr. Samir Mahmoud's research, right? But so thank you for bringing that up, exactly. And I read his PhD too. And that's exactly what he says. You have the freedom to imagine God as you wish in Islam, because he takes on all forms. But he did his best not to spell it out. I'm doing my best to spell it out in very explicit detail. Like, what is the implication of that, right? Because yeah, anyways. So that's exactly it. Thank you so much, Mira.
Welcome.
So what that means? yeah, Amjad. So that's why there's no reason why a Christian in his own religion cannot imagine Jesus Christ in the imagination. Plus, he also has permission to see Jesus Christ in the physical form, according to the 5th session we took. In Hinduism, you have permission to see Krishna and Vishnu and Ganesha and Lakshmi and all of them in your imagination. But right? But so does a Muslim, knowing that they are God's madahir. In the salat, you're seeing God's particularized form, surah al-muta'ayyana, in the salat, the one who's in front of you, because one of the hadiths is that God is in the qibla of the worshipper. So you are connecting to this specific form in that moment, and that's your moment, whether it's Jesus Christ or any of them. And so if you come from a Christian background and you become a Muslim, you're still connected to that through the imagination. Yes, Ghada, go ahead.
I might seem funny now, but why did they bother to go for Futuhat Islamiyya and breaking all the aliha of Asnam, the statues, if everything is a tajalli of Allah?
Well, first of all, because not all
They
of them
عذبوا
share.
حالهم.
Yeah. So, by the way, Ghada, you know what? Okay, let me say something. So first of all, not all of them share Ibn Arabi's view. That's fair, right? Not everyone sees the world the way he does. That's a fair point. But Ghada, they didn't break all the statues. Maybe some of them. Does anyone remember the Bamiyan Buddha statue, the huge one in Afghanistan?
Yeah.
You guys remember that?
Yeah,
Yes.
it was still there until Taliban got rid of it.
Yeah. Do you know who passed by that statue and didn't do anything?
Who?
The Sahaba. There were Sahaba in Afghanistan at the time, and they, like after Rasulullah passed away, obviously, they passed by a statue. No one did anything. Not the Tabi'in or Tabi'in. No one did anything to that statue. No one. For all those years, it only got destroyed 20 years ago. Or like 24 years ago, I think. Something like that. It got destroyed 24 years ago. And lots of Muslims kept the Christian iconographies. By the way, Ghada, at the time in the 7th, 8th centuries, Christians were having a crisis in understanding their icons. Are they halal or not halal? Literally. So the Christians who felt that Christian icons were actually pagan wanted to destroy them. When the Muslims were ruling over the Christians, what did they do? They did not allow them to do that. They said, but there's other Christians who want to keep the icons, so they kept them. There's actually many instances of Muslims preserving all these artifacts. Muslims were in Greece for 300 years. Did you know that? And we still have all those statues. Muslims preserved the Parthenon, one of the most famous buildings in Greece. It's actually everywhere, Ghada, everywhere. And especially India, but you've got this, we can't get into it right now, but you've got this huge polemic between Hindus and Muslims about what the Muslims did during the time of the Mughal Empire. There's a huge polemic, but Muslims did not destroy Hindu structures and idols because they're still there. If there was destruction, the professor and scholar Richard Eaton, when it comes to like Hindu temples, in Hindu polemics, you will hear these diatribic points about how Muslims destroyed like something like 50, 60,000 Hindu temples, something ridiculous. Then Richard Eaton says, but when you look at the archaeological evidence, at the time of Aurangzeb, the Mughal emperor at that time, he could not have destroyed more than like maximum 50, 60, 70 temples. He could not have gone beyond 70 temples. Because the Muslims are preservers. Absolutely fascinating question, Ghada. Thank you so much for asking it.
You're most welcome.
So not only is this permitted, according to the Emir, it is desirable because we are ordered to have presence with God in our acts of worship, and each person according to their own belief. In the imagination, that is lawful for them, and it's lawful for us. And now we come to the final section, which is diverse paths of beliefs, right? Which is what we talk about in the Quran and the Sharia as having an all-encompassing form. This is what it means. So the Sheikh will come back to now in the Futuhat about Tanzih and Tashbih, which is in the Quran. So this is what Sheikh Al-Akbar says about all the Shariah, the previously divinely revealed laws that belong to the previous prophets. He says, God sent down the revealed laws according to these levels, right? Levels of tanzih and tashbih, so that the divine bounty would include all creatures, everyone. How is this possible, especially in the Quran? It includes those kinds of people. Number one, those who see God in negative terms. Negative doesn't mean bad. Negative means he can't be like the other things. So by negating creation. So they see God in negative terms through the declaration of his incomparability, his tanzih. Second group, those who see God. So the first group, they're like the falasifa and probably some of them mutakallimun, not all of them, but some of them. They can only see God in terms of tanzih, and that's the only appropriate way to talk about him. Second group, those who see God as possessing the most beautiful names, that Asma al-Husna, but leaning in the direction of tanzih. In other words, he has hearing, but his hearing is not like your hearing or my hearing, and it is a hearing of complete perfection, right? And the third group, those who can only connect to God in terms of tashbih. So God has something for all of them. So, for example, Sheikh Al-Akbar says, God sent down لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ for the sake of the person who knows God as being غير مقيد, non-delimited. He has no restrictions. Complete tanzih. There's nothing like him. In the first meaning of the word, don't go back to our previous lesson. Just in the simple sense of nothing is like him, he brought this verse down for the person who has pure tanzih. So you're included. That means you're God in a valid way. Second group, he sent down his words. He and God encompasses everything in knowledge, right? With the Asma al-Husna. He is powerful over everything by being al-Qadir. He performs whatsoever he desires by being al-Murid. He is hearing, seeing, Samir, Basir, right? The reason it's different to the first group is because the first group don't even like to talk about God's sifat. They don't even like to talk about it, right? But here, the second group, his sifat, they connect to his sifat and believe in his sifat because it's in the Quran, obviously. Allah, there is no God but He, the alive, the self-subsistent, Al-Hayy Qayyum, the one who stands up. And through his words, grants him protection till he hears the word of God, his kalam. So he's al-mutakallam. And he knows everything. وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. All of this is for the sake of him who delimits God by attributes of perfection. So he is muqayyid by his own attributes. That's why the first group don't like to do what the second group is doing. Because you have to say, no, he is absolutely mutlaq. Absolutely mutlaq. He's غير muqayyid. But then you say in the second group, well, yeah, he's unlimited, but he does talk about having attributes like us a little bit, but towards the direction of tanzih. Knowing and speaking and hearing, seeing, it's not like the way you and I do it. But he still talks about it. So God brought these ayat for the sake of the one who does taqeed of God, but taqeed al-kamaliyah, his attributes of perfection. Then, for the third group, God has also sent down as part of the Shariah his words, Ar-Rahman, wait, no, that's not how the verse goes. But the All-Merciful sat down upon the throne. Istawa al-Arsh. But if anyone remembers the exact ayah, please tell me. But it's from Surah Taha, right?
الرحمن على العرش استوى.
Yes, exactly. Ar-Rahman al-Arsh istawa. Thank you so much, Nira. Exactly. So he's sitting down on the throne. That's very tashbihi. He is with you wherever you are. Whoever wants to connect to him. The one who sees that God sits upon the throne, he has to look up to heaven. He wants to look up and know that God is above him, in the sky. And you'll come to this in the Fusus al-Hikam class because Rasulullah, he comes across a woman, and Shaykh Abdul Ghani Nabusi, he mentions this as well. A woman who can't speak. So Rasulullah, he asks her about God, right? And she points up. So then Rasulullah, he accepts knowing the location. But it's shara, it's lawful for her to point up. And so she's doing all right. And then he's with you wherever you are. Someone wants to connect to God knowing that he's with you wherever you are. And he is God in the heavens and the earth. You can see God in heaven and earth. This is tashbih. And then the ayah, running before our eyes. And the ayah, had we desired to take an amusement, we would have taken it to us from ourselves, the divine names. That's all tashbih. And of course, you could add to that, wheresoever you turn, there's the face of God. Many, many ayahs of tashbih. So, whichever one you incline towards, whichever group you think you're more like, whichever one you feel is closer to your inner personality, there's something for you in the Quran. So in this way, the revealed laws include everything demanded by the constitutions, by the constitutions of the cosmos. The object of belief is one of these kinds, but now he goes to the insan kamil, but he who has a perfect constitution embraces all these beliefs. He knows where they come from and where they go, and nothing of them is absent from him, which is why he does not blame anyone for having a certain belief. And so all the gods are included, all the divine attributes are included, and so all types of people are included, no matter who you are. It is the last messenger who brought the most all-comprehensive Sharia, who brought all types of verses for all kinds of people, because he himself encompasses them all. That's why the diversity of religions, the final goal of having this diversity is rahmah. We come back to it. And so the Shaykh Al-Akbar says this in the Futuhat as well. You can find this translation in William Chittick, Imaginal Worlds. And so he says, God says, we never chastise until we send forth a messenger. That should have quotation marks, I apologize. Right? So it's from the Quran, which I think it goes something like, وَمَا نُعَذِّبُهُمْ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا, something like that. Or sorry, no, وَمَا كُنَا مُعَذِّبِينَ, that's it. وَمَا كُنَا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. Right? So we never punish anyone before we send a messenger. So then Shaykh Al-Akbar says, note that God did not say until we send forth a person. He said messenger, Rasul. He didn't say person. Hence, the message of the one who is sent must be established for the one to whom it is directed. There must be clear and manifest proofs established for each person to whom the messenger is sent. You can't just bring general proofs. It has to be the specific person that messenger is sent to. For many a sign, ayah has with it obscurity or equivocality. There are many verses which have shubha or equivocality. The word means you could understand the verse in more than one way. So it's not clear what God intended in that verse, such that some people do not perceive what that verse proves. So the clarity of the proof must be such that it establishes the person's messengerhood for each person to whom he is sent. Only then, if the person refuses it, he'll be taken into account. Hence, this verse has within it a tremendous mercy, because of the diversity of human dispositions that lead to a diversity of views. And he who knows the all-inclusiveness of the divine mercy, which God reports embraces all things, wasi'a kulli shay, knows that God did this only because of mercy toward his servants. Right? And so that's why we did what we did. We talked about the inclusion of all divinities, and we talked about how Islam, or at least Akbari metaphysics, can include all kinds of people, right? Whether it's the various degrees of the al-fatra, the 5 spiritual types of spiritual seekers and the periods of the fatra, the rational thinker who's inspired or touched by an angel, right? The inspired warner, the practitioner of the makaram al-akhlaq, right? Just like what Bushido does. And the non-spiritual legislator of governmental laws who preserves maqasid al-sharia, life, wealth, families, and lineage or honor. And there's also a spiritual legislator who knows he's a mother for God, the nawamis of the sages who establish laws in every city, every place, and every clime. Those are all valid. They're all sages, hukama. And God has validated all their laws. And the philosopher who practices spiritual purification, the ones who do ijtihad, all of them, even the polytheistic mujtahid who mixes prophetic practices with his idol worship, he's excused. And the sun worshippers Ibn Arabi meets, that's an example of that. And those who invent their own spiritual paths, aiming to please God, that's the rahbaniyah, right? The ones who do what's called sujood ta'zeem, right? The prostration of veneration, not worshiping the object they prostrate to, but only to honor it. That's in the verse on Rahbaniyya. If you need more details, go back to that class or ask me again. And anyone from any sect or creed who attains to the station of ubudiyya and poverty and submission, right? He's saved. People with divinely revealed books revealed before Islam, they have the potential to gain spiritual knowledge and stations when they undertake the commands that are written in their books. That's still valid, right? And detach themselves from the world, as the Sufis do. There are Jewish and Christian saints. Ibn Arabi talks about them. And the Kitab al-Tajaliyat were beloved to God. How many a wali habibs we found in churches and synagogues. He says that. You'll find it again in the 5th class, I think. Or is it 6th class? No, sorry, in the 6th session. And even those who paid the jizya in the past, the ones who paid the jizya, they're safe, right? Because, anyways, that goes back again to the 4th class. And the fact that you can be in more than one sharia, like Ibn Barthamla and Lu Chi. We talked about that in the 4th class, if I'm not saying 4th and 5th classes, something like that, right? Lu Chi, who is a Confucian Muslim. He follows Confucius and he's a Muslim. You'll find more details about that in the 5th and 6th classes. And the fact that the laws are abrogated means that they include the previous laws, not exclude them. The fact that you have 124,000 modalities of sainthood, walaya, because there's 124,000 prophets, each one with their own path. So there's 124,000 ways and different kinds of dhawq, tasting for each one, right? This is the last slide, so let's leave it at that. So, as is well known, Ibn Arabi's discourse is typically characterized by having husn al-dhan towards God and creation. So this is a really nice way to end the whole program. So one of the Sheikh's teachers, so this is Ibn Arabi's teacher, his name is Abu Ishaq Tarif. He once told the Sheikh al-Akbar, "Oh my brother, by God, I do not see anyone who knows me, down to the last of them, except that he is a wali of God." So I said to him, "How so, Abu Ishaq? How's that possible?" He said, "People either see me or hear me. Either they say good about me or the opposite. So whoever says what is good about me and praises me has only described me with his own attribute of goodness. For were he not the locus or owner of the attributes, if he didn't have goodness in his own self, he wouldn't recognize it in me. He could not have described me with it. So as far as I'm concerned, he's one of the saints of God because he has that good quality. And the opposite, whoever speaks ill of me, I say he's a saint of God too. God has shown him my deficient state, which makes him a possessor of insight. He has firasa, and unveiling kashaf, gazing into my soul by the light of God. So as far as I'm concerned, he too is a saint. So I see nothing, oh brother, other than a saint of God. Thank you very much.
That's it? It's over?
It's over, Mira. Yes. It
يعطيك
is over.
العافية فارس يعطيك العافية.
Allah yafiki.
You know, I'm remembering something when we were young. We used to watch this kids show, L'école des fans.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
at the end, tout le monde a gagné, which is everyone wins at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
there's a kind of the paradox in the Quran, which is الظاهر الباطن جنة والنار الكفر والإيمان, but everything at the end وسعت رحمتي كل شيء.
Exactly. You got it. Exactly. Did you really go through the whole of Sufi Path of Knowledge with Sidi Mahmoud, the whole book?
No, not yet.
Alhamdulillah, but you're going through it. MashaAllah alaykum. Allah yatikum al because that's exactly it. That's exactly correct. MashaAllah. That's so beautiful. Thank you, Mira.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Zanira, go ahead.
So, yeah, I just had a few questions. Like, so I don't understand. Like,
Go ahead.
what's the incentive then for people to be like Muslim, as an Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah Muslim, if everybody's headed? And like, what's the point of actually, like, not the point, astaghfirullah, but like, do you know what I'm saying? And also, like, the other question is just going back to Ajala al-Aliha, I think, ilahun wahid. And I
Yeah.
understand that, of course, like in terms of manifestations or the idols or whatever being mazahir of Allah, I understand like what he's getting at. But in the Quran itself, I found that Allah says, well, so in a sense, the Shaykh is saying that there's nothing there except God, right? Which I believe that. But at the same time, Allah says, وَالَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ لَا يَخْلُقُونَ شَيْئًا وَهُمْ يُخْلَقُونَ أَمْوَاتٌ غَيْرَ أَحْيَاءٍ وَمَا يَشْعُرُونَ أَيَّانَ يُبْعَثُونَ. And so, like, does he deal with this at all? That Allah is saying that the people that they are calling, except for Allah, they didn't create anything. So if they are, Allah is not calling them mazahir of Allah. Allah is calling them amwat, whereas Allah is al-hayy alladhi la yamut. So why is, like, if that's how Allah is, obviously Allah is more, Arhamar Rahimeen than the Shaykh. And if that's the interpretation that Allah wants people to have or to follow, then why is he like separating himself separating the idols or anybody that they're calling on, anyone that is called on as a deity? Why is he separating them from his manifestation and saying amwatun ghayra ahya, which is basically like saying actually they're not like me and they're not even there.
Yeah, no, they're not there. They're not. They are ma'duma. Ma'duma. Okay? The aliha are ma'duma. What Ibn Arabi would say, first of all, is that yes, Allah has more mercy than him, yes. But he's also Khasmul Muhammadiyya, depending on whoever believes that, but that's not very important for this question. He would answer you, and he would answer that point by saying, read the verse again. Allah is not saying in that verse there's no madahir, because you will find other verses in the Quran that clearly talk about madahir. أينما تولوا فثم وجه الله وهو الظاهر والباطن هو الظاهر. Anything that's ظاهر, it's him. But when you read the verse, it's talking about min dunillah. Correct. The sharik is ma'doom. There's no sharik. That's what the verse means. He has no shuraka. That's absolutely true. Absolutely true. That's why, anyways, that's getting off the subject, right? The shuraka are non-existent. But God didn't say that his madahir are non-existent. His attributes are non-existent. So when you're looking at the aliha, or what you call, not you personally, but what one calls aliha, you're looking at God. وَقَضَىٰ رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدَ إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ. Your Lord has decreed that you worship none but him. That's why when someone is worshiping these gods or deities or different religions, right, you're only worshiping him, because there is none other but him. When you're looking at them, you're looking at him only. Because the verse you cite talks about min dunillah. Yes, min dunillah, apart from him. If you see and perceive the separation of that God, that's non-existent. It doesn't exist. The separation doesn't exist. That thing apart from God does not exist. It only exists through him. But in what way? You have to say it the right way. That's it. That is how I think Ibn Arabi would answer that. They are mayyit compared to him. Of course they are. But when they're his madahir, it's not mayyit because it's him. He's al-hayy. If you see something hayy in that thing, it belongs to God. It's his. So you are looking at God. But if you try to turn them into a sharik, that's the meaning of the verse. If you try to turn them into a sharik, there's no sharik. The sharik is ma'doom. He's non-existent. Exactly. Zinir, you had like a second question? What was the second question?
Yeah, so the first question was how, like, if everybody gets an excuse, then what's
Islam. Yes.
Yeah.
So the other, so first, from Ibn Arabi's point of view, don't forget, you have the perspective that the other religions are lost to time. Even if you have Christianity and Judaism, which are partly still there, they're pretty much lost, right? Even if you argue that other religions are still completely present, right? So Ibn Arabi is still distinguishing between Sharia and Haqiqah. The Sharia still holds, even though the haqiqah is correct. Even though you perceive God in other religions, Islam still, this goes back to the lesson on abrogation, third lesson, when Islam abrogates what came before it. So now the dispensation for our time to the end of time is Islam, right? Because this is what God has chosen, right? Even if you perceive truths in other places, they have now been abrogated. And then the thing I added, if you recall, is that they are valid, but through Islam. Nothing can any longer be valid in terms of Sharia, not haqiqah. Many things are just true in terms of haqiqah. But in terms of Sharia, nothing can any longer be valid except through the hukam that's given by Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That's why us Muslims, knowing that, must remain Muslims. So the Sharia still holds, which goes back to lesson 3 for more details.
Jazakallah, that really clarifies something. But I also wanted to ask, for example, like we talked about Nuh alayhi salam, but I was also wondering about, so just the groups of people, right, that got the excuses. I was wondering if there is, for instance, like the mujtahid excuse, just calling them him, like, I guess, framing them as mujtahid. That is one excuse. But let's say, is there an excuse for people that are not doing that? Like, for instance, some people that he describes as mujtahid, and then they have like their offspring, their descendants, and they just follow in their footsteps without, like, considering anything. And it just, because I'm reminded of Ibrahim alayhi salam's story, where he says, إذ قال لأبيه وقومه ما تعبدون قالوا نعبد أصناما فنظل لها عاكفين قال هل يسمعونكم إذ تدعون أو ينفعونكم أو يضرون قالوا بل وجدنا آباءنا كذلك يفعلون. So their ancestors were doing that, and then he says فإنهم عدو لي إلا رب العالمين. And so
yes,
he's not
absolutely.
saying that they're manifestations of Allah, he's saying they're my enemies.
No, they are manifestations. No. They are manifestations, but they're his enemies. Iblis is a manifestation, but he's our enemy. There's no contradiction.
So do you think those people are mujtahid or
There is no ijtihad in the presence of a prophet. I will refer you back to the 7th lesson, which answers exactly what you're saying. So you can revisit that just to refresh your memory on that lesson, right? But just let me give you a brief answer for now. There's no ijtihad in the presence of a prophet. It is forbidden. Also, there's no ijtihad in the presence of what's called a nas sarih. So, by the way, you talk about something very interesting, Zanira. So that reminds me. So let me say it now. Jazakumullah khairan. The Shaykh al-Akbar talked about Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam and the Kitab al-Isfar, when he ate the fruit from the tree, the apple, right? That was from ijtihad, because he thought that he had husn dhan about the one who was telling him he should eat the apple, which was Iblis, right? So Shaykh al-Akbar says that, but God gave him a clear command: do not approach the tree. So his mistake in that moment, his khata in that moment, was that ijtihad is impermissible in the presence of a nas sarih. Nas sarih and prophet. There's no ijtihad in the presence of a prophet. There's no ijtihad in the presence of a nas sarih. We talk about ijtihad in the absence of a prophet. Now let's go back to the followers of the mujtahid that you're talking about. The followers who do taqleed and don't do ijtihad. It goes back to the question of taklif. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا ما وسعها أو ما أتاها. God does not prescribe for you commands and prohibitions except to the extent of what you yourself can bear, right? The mujtahid, his aql works. So he is obliged to use his aql to find the truth, whichever answer he comes down to. The muqallid is of two types. The muqallid who said, we found our forefathers doing such and such, right? Right, Zanira? Right? Okay. Our forefathers, maybe one of them is mujtahid, by the way, maybe not. If this muqallid has an aql, like the mujtahid, and he has the ability to think. He is punished to the extent for doing what's called ta'til. فهو عطل العقل. If he does not use it on purpose for whatever reason, depending on the diverse reasons you have for being on this earth, right? Maybe for holding on to positions in power, for example, you're punished. But then there's the second kind of muqallid. The second kind of muqallid is, I can't do what the mujtahid is doing. It's insane to try and figure out what the truth is with the, knowing how much effort that requires. I physically can't do it. No problem. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا ما وسعها. It's not in my wasa'. So what's in your wasa' is go ask Ahlul Dhikr. That's the command to them. Go ask Ahlul Dhikr what the right answer is. And then Shaykh Al-Akbar says the Ahlul Dhikr, they are the Ahlul Quran. Because I won't get into the proofs right now. The proofs are in lesson 7. And the Ahlul Quran are the Ahlul Ijtihad. The proofs are in lesson 7. Go back to lesson 7 for the actual proofs of why he says that. So once you ask the mujtahid of what the right answer is, you discharge your duty. Your maximum duty is to ask what the right answer is. Go to him and ask, what is the right answer? Once the muqallid, who can't think, does that, he discharges his duty, he's excused, he's saved. And so is the mujtahid who gets it wrong. They're both saved. It's only one kind of muqallid who's damned. Allah barak fiki, Aisha. Thank you so much. And Khadija, I think that would be like a beautiful idea if people are willing to agree to it. We could all share the final projects for some session in the future, which we'll hold in the future because people are still catching up on the lessons. So we'll keep the chat group open for quite a while. And we could just put a date on it in the future. But thank you, Khadija. I think that's a wonderful idea. If people agree to it, then we should do it. And like I'll set a date. Is that okay, Zanira?
Yeah, thank you. But I was just wondering, so why does Ibrahim alayhi salam like destroy the idols?
Because his Sharia is different from the Sharia of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's different. Because see, Ibrahim, he brings Furqan, not Quran. His state is Furqan. His state necessitates the destruction of the idols. The state of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it necessitates removing the idols from the Kaaba, obviously, for sure. And it forbids you bowing down to the idols. But his Sharia recognizes them as madahir, for sure. As Allah's madahir. إنما إلهكم إله واحد. إنما إلهكم إله واحد. Yes, your ilah, it's an ilah, which is God's madhar. Not min dunillah. Min dunillah, forbidden, because that's the sharik is ma'doom. But your ilah is ilahun wahid. So say it. Your God, yes, this thing you're looking at, it's here, it's real, but it's one God. Say it's one God. That's what's required of you. That is what is required of you. So the hal of Muhammad is different to the hal of Sayyidina Ibrahim. Because the previous prophets bring Furqan, Sayyidina Muhammad he brings Quran. And Sidi Walid, thank you. Yes, Sayyidina Muhammad, yes. So you've got the, I guess, different riwayat that say Muhammad he destroyed the idols of the Kaaba, but there's another riwayat that I remember, that I recall, but really we would need to double check this, that he removes the idols from the Kaaba, right? He taps them with a stick and they fall down. I don't know if that means they break, right? But I think just to keep it very simple and be on the safe side, we can say Muhammad he destroyed the idols, yes. But he does not deny that they are God's madahir. But you could say that he destroys them, sure. It's possible, yes. The ones that inhabit the Kaaba. If you want to go with that view, yes. Sahar, go ahead.
Sure, you said something very, very important or very interesting about Ibn Arabi when he said, go and ask Ahl al-Zikr, Ahl al-Quran. And actually, since I am studying Quran now for quite time, for 3 years now, the issue
MashaAllah.
is all the studies is concentrating only on الظاهر. يعني
Yes.
المعنى الظاهري of القرآن. يعني, and this is where I get my confusion a little bit. I'm grateful, of course, of entering this course and getting introduced to another meaning or a deeper meaning, you know, or المعنى الباطني, as we're saying. But how about I'm just wondering, it's just an open question, I think, in my mind. How about the others? I mean, whomever is getting المعنى الظاهري للقرآن, which is the majority. يعني it's only few of us actually who gets to know المعنى الباطني, and not all of it as well. We are just, I think, just in the very, very start of the road. And a little that I know, and the more that I know, I find out that little that I know. You know, it's very interesting. So I'm not sure about the majority and about the minority, and about as well the you know, they say العامة الخاصة. I'm not really sure about all these segregation, or this is like I feel of a little bit of you know, it's like layers, or segregation of people, or I don't know. So how about the majority? I mean, this is like the, you know, the main question.
Are you saying we should have the segregation, or are you saying you're not sure if we should have it?
No, I don't like it actually. You know, I wish for everyone to understand, but it's not up to me, of course. I mean, it's not up to me.
You know, Sahar,
at all.
You know, Sahar, I will tell you what, because I got asked this question before. So I'll tell you what I also answered before as well. So we don't live in the past. We live in a different time. And the time we live in, we have been already exposed from the moment you're born to the moment you've grown up to this day and age. We have been exposed to extremely powerful, life-changing ideas. Very powerful. Whether you talk about serious philosophers and thinkers and intellectuals like Nietzsche, Sigmund Freud, the psychologist, or Charles Darwin, or Karl Marx for communism, right? Or even Adam Smith for capitalism, or Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone Beauvoir, Kierkegaard, whoever these massive intellectual heavyweights are, the modernist philosophers, the postmodern philosophers, and so many more. All of these ideas are extremely life-changing, extremely life-changing. I know people who have gone to university, learned about Nietzsche, and came out an atheist. We don't live in the time in the past where the cross-pollination of ideas was confined to one place, or at least the distribution of ideas was slower. We don't live in that past. So in the past, you say, yeah, you shouldn't. The Sheikh used to say, don't read Ibn Arabi's books. And there's no need to, right? Because what we're providing for you here in our town, village, and place is sufficient. What you're being provided for today is not sufficient. It's not sufficient. If you are willing to accept that people can be exposed to the extremely potent and powerful ideas of whoever it is, Karl Marx, Charles Darwin, Nietzsche, Sigmund Freud, Kierkegaard, Simone Beauvoir, Jean-Paul Sartre, all of them. Descartes, René Descartes, of course. David Hume's, right? if you're willing to accept that they can be exposed to all of their philosophies and ideas and their teachings, you have to accept that Ibn Arabi can also be read, because he's the only one who stands up to them.
No, of course, I am with the idea. Of course, I'm saying, like the majority now they know more about the Zohir, not about the batin of the
Yeah,
meaning
yes.
when it comes to Quran, of example. And this is what I'm saying. It should be known to everyone.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean you. I meant like in general. Like you in general, not you. But yeah, no, I totally hear you.
All right, okay.
Yeah, تعرف كيف? Like if someone says that you shouldn't read Ibn Arabi, right? Then that would be my response. So I agree with you. So I totally agree with you. I 100% agree with you. Yes. I think we could be responsible about the way in which we go about it. But I am in agreement with you that we're past the day and age where you say you shouldn't read these things anymore.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for bringing this to us. Really. Thank you. Yani, I'm really grateful. Really.
Thank you
And
for
the more
coming.
that I know, the more I know that a little that I know. This is really it's interesting. It's fascinating world. Really. Thank you, Dr. Paris.
I think that's the Socratic Zilk. All I know is that I know nothing.
Exactly. Thank you, Zira. Exactly. And thank you, Sahar. By the way, you and me both. The more I know, I know little. Exactly. You and me both. Subhanallah. Yes, Zada, go ahead.
I just wanted to add something, or like it's an observation. I think the fact that we are exposed to that amount of school of thoughts puts more responsibility on us.
Yes. 100%. I agree. It puts more responsibility on us. Yeah, absolutely. To let other people who need this know about it. Not everyone wants to know about it. So, and I totally respect that, because Ibn Arabi isn't for necessarily everyone, but anyone who kind of like needs something, he has something for everyone if they want it. And I totally agree with you, Ghada. That's how I see it as well. Yeah, we do have a responsibility.
Takes me to the second one, which is ignorance is a bliss, but knowing also is a huge responsibility, really. It's, I don't know how to explain, but anyway, it's still on my mind.
Sure thing. Yes, Ataf, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, throughout the course, I got to know Ibn Arabi core concepts more in a more solid way. I was quite keen to understand his, I would call it path of knowledge, as William
Yes.
used to call it, and to understand it. It's quite eye-opening, specifically his path in terms of the literal understanding of Quran phrases. Very much interesting the way he interprets these phrases. Absolutely very interesting and very important in a way. Never read it in that way. I'm more toward reading Quran in a more conventional, I would say, way. But quite interesting to look at it differently. I guess I would need more time to get to look at it again and to digest it and to read other resources to have more full picture of a kind of a puzzle. I feel it's a puzzle right now, but I need to connect it together. But a great effort, and thank you so much, Dr. Faris, for everything you've done to us during this course.
Thank you so much, Ataf. You know what? And thanks so much for your very just and, mashallah, mature words. What we did over the past 10 weeks was like a crash course. it really takes years to kind of like let this stuff kind of like sink in. So I completely understand you. So thank you for saying that. Walid, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Do you guys hear me?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I just want to say Jazakallah for teaching us in the course and introducing us to the thoughts of Ibn al-Arabi. So my question is, okay, my understanding is pretty much that I guess these other religions that worship these, I guess, other deities, in a sense it's right and in a sense it's right and wrong in a sense, right? Would that be like
Yes.
kind of a so when it comes to I guess the modern world that we live in with the rise of atheism and agnosticism, the argument that sort of I always hear from these people is that how could an all merciful, all loving God, allow suffering, right? So my question would be, since these people say that they disbelieve in this all loving, all merciful God, does that they say they don't believe in this God, but does that mean like subconsciously they believe in, let's say, a different attributes of God or different, I guess, manifestations, like in I guess subconsciously for them? Would that
Totally. This is called al-ilah al-makhluq fi al-i'tiqadat. Because what it means is that, like, it's like Professor William Chick once told someone, he's just telling him, like, I don't believe in God. He does this, and that. So then William Chick got, I don't believe in the God that you don't believe in either. I don't believe in the God that you don't believe in either.
Okay.
Because then the implicit assumption is that you believe in a different kind of God. Al-ilah al-makhluq fi al-i'tiqadat. There's a certain kind of God that certain people believe in, or a certain person believes in. And it's like, I'm willing to acknowledge him if I see him this way, right? And so if I'm taught, not me, Faris, but just generic as an example, about God in a certain way, and that doesn't align with what I believe in, then I'm going to disbelieve in God. Although the meaning is, I disbelieve in your version of God. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
So would it be fair to say that like everyone kind of subconsciously believes in Creator? Or like I guess the fitra is always there, it's just clouded.
The Mi'ad al-Jazairi says there is not one person who's truly a jahid. Now the Arabic is jahid, but C.D. Michel Trotskovitz, he translates the word as atheist. So if you take his translation, the word means there is not a single person who's truly an atheist. If his words make you think otherwise, it is you who has not understood them correctly. So there's not a single person who is completely an atheist or completely a jahid.
What is like the more, I guess, mainstream definition of that Arabic word you mentioned instead of atheist?
But the principle stands. Jahid is someone who is rebelling against God. So
Okay.
So maybe he translated that way because it's possible that there's certain tafsirs that render it that way. I don't know, like why translate that way. But the principle stands. If there's someone who is rebelling against God, like an atheist, kind of like just as a general definition, is rebelling against God in some way, right? Maybe not intentionally. Like Charles Dawkins is like a militant atheist, and there's like other atheists who are not militant. There's different kinds of atheists, right? So even like the militant atheist, if you think that his words really make you believe he truly doesn't believe in any kind of God, then you've not listened to him carefully. That's what the Emir is saying. You've not listened to him carefully. There is a certain kind of God he believes in, but it's implicit in what he's saying. So everyone subconsciously does believe in a certain kind of God because it would be probably written into the very fabric of our being. I don't want to say DNA, but it's written into the very fabric of our being because we were all present at the major tajalli that happened to us at Yom Alastu bi Rabbikum bal shahidna. We were all there.
Okay. Jazakallah. One more question. How long are the videos going to be up? like the recordings of the sessions? Are they going to be up forever or?
Yeah. So it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
We're trying to get them uploaded onto the same playlist. They should be uploaded forever. Should be.
Okay.
So just let me stop the session here. Send it to the cloud.